Ready to start? We are on Psalm 39.
Oh, Terry, can you do something?
Where's she at? Angie, can you mute?
I'm trying.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Psalm 39. What is the measure of my days? To the choir master, to Jeduthun, a psalm of David. Kathy, do you have the theme?
Apart from God, life is fleeting and empty. This is an appeal for God's mercy because life is so brief. Author David.
My Bible has a little side note on verses 4 through 7. It says brevity. It often feels as though the older one gets, the shorter life seems. Boy, isn't that true?
Yeah.
David seemed to grasp this irony when he wrote of the fleeting nature of life in 4 and 5, pointing to the vanity of worldly pursuits that promise fulfillment through fading things such as wealth, power, and prestige. He illustrated how such things are meaningless against the backdrop of the brevity of life on earth. Understanding this ultimate futility led him to cry out to the Lord as his only hope. Jesus also derided the senselessness of worrying over temporary things such as food, clothing, and length of life. He exhorted his followers to make an essential shift to storing up treasures in heaven. Since wealth and possessions can be threatened by theft, destruction, and decay, and will ultimately pass away, Luke 21:33, the only true security can be found by investing in things that last for eternity, Matthew 6:19 through 21. Like worldly possessions, the physical bodies of people are also subject to destruction and decay. However, the New Testament reminds those who believe in Jesus that they have experienced a fundamental change in their lives. And though their bodies waste away, inwardly they are continually renewed. Since being born of eternal seed, which never perishes through faith in Christ, they can trust God to continue his good work in them until the day of Jesus Christ. And since Cindy is not here, I will also do John MacArthur. He has an overview, of course. Psalm 39 is an exceptionally heavy lament.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Don't we usually read the psalm first?
Oh, yes. That's a good idea. Kim.
All right, Psalm 39. I said to myself, I'm going to quit complaining. I'll keep quiet, especially when the ungodly are around me. But as I stood there silently, the turmoil within me grew to the bursting point. The more I mused, the hotter the fires inside. Then at last I spoke and pled with God. Lord, help me to realize how brief my time on earth will be. Help me to know that I am here for but a moment more. My life is no longer than my hand. My whole lifetime is but a moment to you. Proud man, frail as breath, a shadow, and all his busy rushing ends in nothing. He heaps up riches for someone else to spend. And so, Lord, my only hope is in you. Save me from being overpowered by my sins, for even fools will mock me then. Lord, I am speechless before you. I will not open my mouth to speak one word of complaint, for my punishment is from you. Lord, don't hit me anymore. I am exhausted beneath your hand. When you punish a man for his sins, he is destroyed, for he is as fragile as a moth infested cloth. Yes, man is frail as breath. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Listen to my cry. Don't sit back, unmindful of my tears, for I am your guest. I am a traveler passing through the earth as all my fathers were. Spare me, Lord. Let me recover and be filled with happiness again before my death.
Any thoughts? All right. Now I will read John MacArthur. Thank you, Kim. The overview for 39, 1 through 13. Psalm 39 is an exceptionally heavy lament, which compares with Job 7 and much of Ecclesiastes. It also carries on the here today, gone tomorrow emphasis of Psalm 37 with a new twist, an application to all men, especially the psalmist. In this intense lament, David will break his initial silence with 2 rounds of requests and reflections about the brevity and the burdens of life. And then he gives 3 breakdowns, like an introduction. His silence is 1 through 3. And then round 1, the brevity and burdens of life, is 4 through 6. And then round 2 is again the brevity and burdens of life, verses 7 through 13. 39, the title, to Jeduthun. This is most likely a specifically designated worship director. And then there's other mentions apparently in 1 Chronicles 9:16, 16:37, 25, 1 through 3, and Nehemiah 11:17. 39, I will. The form of these expressions imitates strong volitional commitments. Not sin with my tongue. This sinning could have been in one or both ways. One, directly by criticizing God for not bringing retribution on the wicked, or 2, indirectly by complaining in the hearing of the wicked. 39:2, his silence did not ease his pain. It seemed to make it all worse. 39:3, and I guess he says, see Jeremiah's predicament in Jeremiah 20, verse 9. And then, of course, the phrase is, then I spoke with my tongue. Contrast the silence of Psalm 39:1, I guess, with Jeremiah 29. Yet he did not violate the conditions of his original commitment, since he did not vent before men, but unloaded his burdens before God. I'm going to try and switch glasses here. I'm having a hard time reading. There we go. 39:4. For similar prayers about brevity and burdens of life, you can look at Job 6:11. There's a bunch in Job, and then Psalm 90:12 and Ecclesiastes 2:3. 39:5. Hand breadths. He measures the length of his life with the smallest popular measuring unit of ancient times. I guess it's also referred to as 4 fingers, so a hand breadth would be 4 fingers. And my lifetime is as nothing before you. On measuring God's age, breadth, for the same Hebrew word of Ecclesiastes 1:2, vanity. There's a total of 31 occurrences of this term in Ecclesiastes. Psalms 144:4 on the concept in the New Testament of James, on the concept in the New Testament, James 4:14. So he's doing a lot of comparisons, like, of these terms or quotes. All right, 39:6. Surely for nothing they are in turmoil. On the futility and irony of this phenomenon. And then he also has Job 27:16. 39:9. In this verse, the terminology of 38:13 and 39:2 reappears, accompanied in the theology of Job 42. And then 39:11, like a moth. The moth normally represented one of the most destructive creatures, but here the decay of the moth is intended. And then verse 12, sojourner or guest. He considers himself to be a temporary guest and a squatter in the presence of God. And then he gives a bunch of verses also for that. And then 13, the stark request is parallel in its intention with verse 9. That was a hard read with him this morning. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that. Except, I guess, the pain of Job, he was comparing that a lot.
I like what Mark Concordance says about 1 to 3. It's when he was talking about him not sinning with his mouth. It says David resolved to keep his tongue from sin. That is, he decided not to complain to other people about God's treatment of him. David certainly had reason to complain. He was anointed king of Israel, but he had to wait many years before taking the throne. Then one of his sons tried to kill him and become king instead. But when David could not keep still any longer, he took his complaints directly to God. We all have complaints about our job, money, or situation, but complaining to others may make them think that God cannot take care of us. It may also look as if we blame God for our troubles. Instead, like David, we should take our complaints directly to God. He can take it.
I guess that's why he was comparing it to Job so much.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Both 38 and 39 record David attempting to remain silent in a time of trial, lest he say something that would offend believers or give ammunition to unbelievers. In this psalm, David doesn't seem to be gravely ill, but he has been visited by some stroke from the Lord because of his sins. Also, the old problem of prosperity of the wicked is in the picture. It appears that the wicked, or the foolish in verse 8, were blaspheming God and maligning David in his affliction, and the king was greatly concerned lest he bring reproach on the name of the Lord. There is a dirge-like quality to the psalm, and we marvel that David gave the hymn to the chief musician to use in public worship. Jeduthun was one of 3 musicians David put in charge of the worship at the sanctuary. The others were Heman and Asaph.
One of 3
Yes,
musicians.
in charge of worship. At the sanctuary.
And what were the names of the other 2?
Heman, Heman, and Asaph, Asaph.
Thank you.
And there are references to 1 Chronicles 16, 37 to 43, and 2 Chronicles 5:12, and also chapter 35:15.
Thank you.
Jeduthun is mentioned in the titles to Psalms 62 and 77. Recorded in this psalm are 4 progressive stages David's overcoming his difficult experience. The first one, he was silent, a burning heart, verses 1 to 3. Seeing the prosperity of the wicked and hearing their blasphemous words so angered David that he wanted to retaliate and say something to defend God, but he deemed it best to keep quiet. But this restraint only made his heart burn with intense pain, until finally he had to speak out. The 2 Emmaus disciples had burning hearts because of the way the Lord had expounded the word to them, and Ezekiel had anguish in his spirit because of the difficult calling God had given him. David didn't even say good things. He just kept quiet as long as he could. There is a time to keep silence and a time to speak, Ecclesiastic 3:7. And wise is the person who knows the difference. David didn't argue with God. in verse 9, or with those who reproach him, but he did pray to the Lord. The second one, he was despondent, a burdened heart, verses 4 to 6. When we find ourselves burying our true feelings and creating physical and emotional pain for ourselves, then it's time to talk to the Lord and seek his help. David knew that life was short and that the days would pass swiftly, but he also knew that he was frail and that one day he would die. He began to measure his days and saw that they were but a handbreadth, which is 4 fingers, and his age nothing in God's sight. Verily, every man at his best state is altogether vanity. Verse 5 sounds like a statement from the Ecclesiastes by David's son Solomon, and he repeated the thought in verse 11. The Hebrew word translated vanity means a breath, emptiness. One of my Hebrew professors described vanity as what's left after you break a soap bubble. In verse 6, he compared life to an empty show with shadow people bustling about trying to get rich. Busy for what? Wealthy for what? Years later, Solomon raised the same questions, and Jesus emphasized the same truth in Luke 12:16 to 21. If you measure the length of life, you may become despondent, but if you look around you and measure the depth of life, you are appalled. Life is swift, life is short, and for most people, life is futile. In modern vocabulary, people are living for the image and not the reality. The third one, he was confident, a believing heart, verse 7. This is a central verse in the psalm and the turning point in David's experience. If life is short and goes past so swiftly, asked David, what am I waiting for? If the world is nothing but a shadow image, let me give myself to the Lord, who is the foundation of all that is real and lasting. Today we would say the reality is of Christ, Colossians 2:17. The main concern is not how long we live, but how we live. Life is measured not by how rich we are in material wealth, but whether we have values that last. Are we living with eternity's values in view? He who does the will of God abides forever, 1 John 2:17. In turning by faith to the Lord, David moved from hopelessness to hope, from paralysis to action. The next verses describe what he did to bring about change. He was repentant, a broken heart, verses 8 to 13. We begin with David the sinner and listen to his prayer for forgiveness in verses 8 and 9. Like every truly convicted sinner, his mouth had been stopped, and he admitted his guilt before God. We don't know the particular sins that had brought this stroke from the Lord, and we don't have to know. We do know that God listens to the cry of the brokenhearted and forgives when we confess. David was especially concerned that he not give occasion to the foolish to ridicule his faith. Next, David, the sufferer, pleaded with God to remove the stroke and heal his body. He used 3 images to get his point across: a plague or sickness, draining away his life, the blow of God's hand, like a loving, patient disciplining a child, the rebuke of his word, which cut deeply into David's heart. C.S. Lewis was correct when he wrote in The Problem of Pain, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to arouse a deaf world. The human body ages, decays, and dies, and the material wealth we gather gradually loses its value, like a moth silently destroying a garment. Jim Elliot's oft-quoted statement certainly applies here. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. Vanity of vanity, all is vanity, unless we put our faith and hope in God. Finally, David the sojourner prays for God's direction as he makes his pilgrim way through life with its joys and sorrows. The world is a vain show. John Bunyan called it Vanity Fair, and God's people are aliens and strangers here. We are not strangers to God, for he knows us and we know him, but we are strangers with God as his welcomed guest. He hears our prayers and cries, and he sees our tears. In the world you have tribulation, Jesus told his disciples, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. John 16:33. His closing prayer was that God would turn away his frowning face and give him strength to return to life with its duties and burdens, and then one day enable him to pass into eternity. The phrase no more doesn't suggest annihilation or the absence of an afterlife, but that David would no more be on his earthly pilgrimage. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And that's it.
Okay, Tony. Any thoughts before I start, Tony? Tony 1 through 3. David resolves not to sin through his words. The book of Proverbs contains much wisdom about how to do this, which is necessary help because James reminds us how hard it is to control the tongue. See James 3 1 through 12. Because David did not want to say anything he would regret, he kept silent, even from speaking good. In the long run, however, he took his silence too far. It only intensified his pain and anguish. We can sin not just with our words, but also with our silence. Knowing when to speak and when to withhold something requires wisdom. 4 through 11. David prays that God would help him understand how short-lived he was. In comparison to God, his lifespan was insignificant. Every human being, in fact, is nothing but a vapor in light of such brevity of life, and its uncertainty. In fact, is nothing but a vapor in light of such brevity of life and its uncertainty. David declares that God is his hope and the one who would rescue him. David also petitioned God to end his discipline and remove the consequences of sin he was enduring. Apparently, he knew what he did. 12 through 13. David asked that God would not be silent, as David had been earlier when he should have spoken. He prays that God would hear his cry and not treat him like a stranger and show him favor in his remaining days. The end. Does anybody else have anything out of their Bibles and commentaries they'd like to share? Wonder why he was silent in the beginning with God. Like, I would think that, he would freely talk to God. He knows God knew what was going on.
I was kind of wondering that too. I mean, of course, we don't know in what order these Psalms take place necessarily, but it wouldn't be like he probably had kept silent before because we know he had expressed concerns, anger, whatever before.
I was going to say something about this earlier and then I didn't, but I kind of identify with this because that verse 3, 2 and 3. But as I stood there silently, the turmoil within me grew to the bursting point. The more I mused, the hotter the fires inside. Then at last I spoke. And I just, in my mind, I guess I'm thinking you mull over it and you stew over it and you stew over it, trying to make sense of it or get yourself in a good headspace about it. And then, I mean, but sometimes you just can't, and you stew and you stew, and then finally it just, you either spill out inappropriately and maybe, complain to other people or try to defend yourself to whoever created the offense, or finally you just break down and just talk to God about it, like, so it's like, I think it's a process of trying to handle it. And then you realize you just can't. And it's at least ultimately going to God and not doing something, handling it a different way.
That's a good viewpoint. That makes sense.
My Bible on 39:10 has a little side note. It sort of agrees with what Kim is saying. It's entitled Wrestling with God. Not all the Psalms are happy. Some, such as this one, and Psalms 44 and 48, are intensely sad. They try to make sense out of suffering and fail. They ask God for help and receive none. The Bible's inclusion of such hopelessness cries eloquently testifies to God's acceptance of human struggles. These Psalms are not the final word on suffering. They show, however, that wrestling with God has value even when you fail to find answers.
Yeah, that's true too.
I mean, and at the end of the day, God wants us to rely on him. So if nothing else comes of it, God knows we turn to him. Like, we are trying to rely on him. We're trying to give it to him.
Well, I was thinking of, wasn't it Jacob who wrestled with God
Oh, yeah.
through the night? You know what I mean? Like, I'm wondering if this is kind of the same thing now that you and Angie have pointed that out. Like,
Yeah, because, most of the time, nothing ever really eases that burden, that the turmoil inside. You can complain to people and they can listen and, try to be kind, and you can spout off to the offender, and it sometimes just falls on deaf ears. They feel the way they do, and not going to change anything. So, I mean, really, somehow crying out to God and just giving that over to him is a relief. It's really the only thing that brings relief.
well, I'm wondering too, like, because this was his sin, like he was lamenting because he was getting punished because of something he did that it doesn't identify. But like, do we sometimes also say, well, like he knew that's what it was, so like I'm just going to sit here and take it because I deserve that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and then it just was so heavy that he finally breaks down then to God and asks him to stop. Is it
Yeah.
like like his conscience, was his conscience the reason he chose to be quiet and just take the punishment and not talk to God about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any
Yes. That's a good point too.
any other thoughts, wisdom from you ladies?
Are they going to tell us what the sin was?
I don't think we know, but I think like the sin was that he was disobedient, I guess, at the end of the day, regardless what it was, and like as an individual sin.
Isn't
And
it? Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
well, I was just thinking too that, throughout all of Psalms so far, it's talked about him being punished for his sins, however many or few there were, or bad. So it seems like this is like an ongoing long time thing, but we don't really know what kind of time frame elapses in all of this necessarily. Although we're reading it every day ourselves, it seems like, man, this is just going on forever. This days and days and days of this, which, like I said, we have no idea the time frame. And so it's like, well, he really is getting tired of being chastened or chased by Saul and his son, and so he really is distraught. But it just
Well,
seems
and
like it's going on forever.
I think one of them made it sound like this was in his older days. Like he's basically, oh, just let me come home. Like I'm sick of being here. But I think too, keep in mind that even though David has obviously committed a lot of sins, he still was a man after God's heart. Like he was wanting to be, and he repented and he made some huge sins, but at the same time, he did love the Lord and
Yeah,
tried to be obedient.
that's kind of what I was thinking. We've read he's repented and he's asked forgiveness and all that, but it just seems like it's just like one thing after another, that he's allowed to go through, even
Well,
though
I
he's
think, don't you think too, the higher you would be in leadership, the worse it would be? Like the person at the top, like David being the king, or the superintendent of the school, or what the pastor, whatever, like whoever's at the top, they take the biggest beating and have the highest responsibility.
Mhm.
Any other thoughts? I think as parents, even like it's such a huge responsibility. Like most of my stress and heartache has come from parenting, like wanting to be a good parent, failing as a parent, um, questioning myself as a parent.
Well, and it doesn't stop even when they're older.
No.
We still question things that when they were little that maybe we did, or and now even as we have children that are adults, you kind of sidestep. You don't necessarily just keep, it's not like you can necessarily just punish them, tell them to go to their room without supper or something anymore, but it's still that heartache that we all feel in decisions that they make for their lives
Well,
that
and I,
we think could stem from something that we have done.
yeah, yeah, and I think too, like eh, eh, during, I mean, all of the decisions I made raising my kids, I thought at that time were in their best interest. You know what I mean? But like, so you only have the knowledge that you have at the time. But I think that goes back to like you truly love them so much, you just want what's best for them. But even in that, you're still making mistakes. So is that kind of like David with God? Like in all of the things, he truly wanted to do what was pleasing to God, but he still made mistakes. Anything from you all?
I was thinking too, in the midst of all the turmoil, David was experiencing or ourselves, and unless we really aren't going to find the way until we do finally break down and talk to God about it, because if it's a sin, he'll bring it to light. If it's just, something we need to lay at rest in our minds and let him just leave it to him and how he's going to work it out, his assurance, I guess. So ultimately, yeah, it's just getting to that point.
I was just trying to think of that song. How's it go? Change my heart, oh God, make it ever true. It's like an old song. I don't know that I've heard it in a while. Maybe First Service still does it.
Yeah, I love that song.
Make it more like you. Any other thoughts? You all are being awful quiet out there. No wisdom from anybody else about life. All right.
Well, the one thing I will say, and my mother always said, the older you get, the faster. I mean, look at last week.
I
Well,
agree.
this is December, coming up on the middle of December.
Well, I agree with that. And I think just even me, I think I'm 56.
You think?
I'm around there. I don't know. Stan knows how old I am. But but the older I get, the more I want to slow down what I'm doing. I don't like I'm being much more picky about what I want to put my time into and what's important. And I think when you're younger, you think, oh, I'm invincible, I have forever. And so like
Hmm.
we drive ourselves crazy with busyness instead of what's important. I agree with your mom. I feel that way too. Every week it's like, is it really Saturday again? Is it really Christmas again? All right. If nothing else, we are ready for our trivia question. Lori's ship in Florida needs to unmute. Who said to the Lord, "Speak, for your servant is listening"?
Samuel.
Mom, you were fast on that one. Yes, Samuel. First Samuel 3:10 is where you can read about that. Good job. You get the gold star. I wish I had a little icon for the gold star. That is correct. All right. Well, this concludes the reading of God's word for today. Until tomorrow,
For
Sure.
Sure.
have a good day.
Good luck, Amber.
Yeah, let us
Yeah.
know, Amber. Update us.